we are here, I think. That is like the first big step in a spiritual path, to know where you are, right? Most of us are coming from the past or planning in the future, and we're never really here and now. And so there's a tension between the present moment and where we think we are. And it's really coming home to the present moment that we keep talking about in all these different ways. As it says in A Course in Miracles, the present moment is the only time there is to time. It's where yourself and God's self, or finiteness and infinite qualities of consciousness, merge or meet. And so by bringing ourselves into a state of openness, calmness, and receptivity, we can let go of the limitations of our past and release those tensions and relax into the present moment. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Under the guise of Tantra. We're going to be talking about Tantra, but probably not in those ways that most Western, Euro-American ideas come up to play, where you're going off on retreats to get naked in a group and kind of explore the body in that way. This is not the Tantra we're going to be talking about. This Tantra is really at the root or core of all sacred spirituality. And the word itself is very interesting. It comes from the Sanskrit, and you have two words really at play here. You have tan and you have tra. And the tan part is where we get our English word tension or extension. These qualities of sort of where you have polarities and there's tension between the two polarities. So that's the first part of the word. There's tension, right? And then the tra is where we also get the word, our word three from. It's this idea of threeness or transcendent. There's tra again. When you transcend the pairs of opposites that are in tension, the third or three, the tra there, is where you're getting beyond duality into non-duality. And the way that Tantra looks at non-duality, it doesn't negate the polarities. It doesn't deny that they exist. It transcends and includes them. It synthesizes them. And so, without going too heady and philosophical here, in our Western European philosophies, especially beginning with Hegel, Hegel had this idea of a dialectic. And the dialectic is you have a thesis, you have an antithesis, and there is the tension. And then you have a synthesis which transcends and includes those two lower dualities or polarities of tension. And then you have a synthesis which creates a triad, right? There's triangle, tra, again, right? Trinity. This is all baked into this idea of tantra, right? And so what we don't recognize, and we're going to see it hopefully up close and personal today, is that the idea of Tantra, it's happening at every scale, in every moment, in its immediacy to every living thing. And so what we're going to play with first is this notion of the breath, right? Every sentient being is breathing, and just in the breath flow, you have Tantra. You have the out-breath and the in-breath, and there you have your pairs of opposites, right? Your duality. But then you also have this silent gap between the inhale and before the exhale begins. And then you have a silent gap when the exhale ends, and the inhale hasn't come up yet. And so there's this third ground. And what's interesting about this idea of the gap between the breaths, this happens to be the first meditation in the non-dual Shaiva Tantra meditation manual, Vijnana Bhairava. And it's basically where and we're going to do this morning, you're going to follow your breath, and as you exhale, you're going to exhale and feel your breath dissolve into empty space about 12 inches in front of your nose. And then when you inhale, you'll follow the inhale all the way in, and you'll feel your inhale dissolve towards the seat of the heart. And as you become more and more attuned to that gap or silence between the breaths, you're going to feel the inhale emerge. It allows a little bit of time to go in, and then it settles into the ground of being, right? The silence. And then from the silence, the exhale emerges. It continues for a little while, and then it dissolves into the ground of being. And so this is going to actually get us into a direct, immediate relationship with the tantric quality of life itself, this very pulse of life, right? There's actually a book written about this whole idea of pulse within Tantra. It's at the root of creation, spanda. It's pulse. Everything that's alive is pulsing, right? And so your breath is this immediate connection to the pulse of God, the breath of God, right? And so we're going to trace this idea. It's not just with the non-dual Shaiva Tantra, but it has its way in Sufism, it has its way in Vajrayana or Tantric Buddhism, it even has its way into Gnostic Christianity. And so we're going to see how all of this plays out. The other idea, and this comes up when I say everything about these traditions, is Tantra is a weaving. So in most common definitions, if you were to open a book on Tantra, you would get this first definition, not the one that I just gave you. It is the warp and woof of a weaver's beam. So you have the vertical and the horizontal, the warp and the woof of creating tapestry. And so the Tantrics also recognize this correspondence, that you have the horizontal of time, right? Time is horizontal, and you have the vertical of eternity. And these two elements, or these two aspects of creation, merge and weave, and that's how we have everything. So what we're looking at is a tapestry of vertical and horizontal, or eternity and time. And so this is also Tantra. You are both. The one listening right now is pure awareness, is the vertical dimension. You never leave the ground of being. You are eternally unborn, right? Non-created. You're in the uncreated space of infinite consciousness, always. You can't leave that. You can dream you're not there, and that's when we get involved in the horizontal, and we become so identified with the self-limiting and the identification with form. But the two never are different, right? And what's beautiful about this, going back to the breath, is that the exhale dissolves into the ground and the inhale dissolves into the ground. And the ground is the fundamental reality. But it's also, if you're going to be really careful in cultivating clear insight, like we will in our Zen class that's coming up, when you cultivate clear insight, you have this vision. Again, I'm throwing out all these $10 words, but you have the clear vision of what the Tibetans would call Dzogchen, the great perfection. The great perfection is the recognition that even the exhale and the inhale are the empty space. They're the clear light. They're the ground. They are the transcendent even when they're occurring. So it's how we begin to learn how to focus our attention and where we're identifying our reality from, that we can begin to see that we've never left our source, and everything that's arising arises within the source and dissolves within the source and is the source. It's the energy of the source, right? So that maybe we'll leave for another time. But to really begin, I didn't take out all my toys this morning. We're going to begin by first getting into the breath. So allow yourself to sit nice and tall in your seat. Elongate the back of your neck, drop your chin slightly, bring your belly in just a little bit. Allow that heart space to soften, relax your shoulders, plant your feet firmly on the floor. And begin to follow the breath. Breath comes in. Feel it go to the heart space and dissolve. Hold that dissolving experience, the gap, the 0 point of the breath. And then exhale. And follow the breath out. Feel it go through the tips of your nostrils And feel it dissolve into empty space, again about 12 inches from your nose. And be aware of the gap or the 0 point, the shunyata. And as you become increasingly aware of the void at the end of the in and the out breaths, you can perhaps begin to feel this spacious quality opening up within your field of perception, this releasing of tension, this relaxation, this dissolving of boundaries. And perhaps as you're getting a sense of this voidness at the ground of being in every moment, in every breath, notice too that this same pulsation is occurring at the level of thought, that your thought, like waves, come from the luminous ground of emptiness or shunyata. They abide for a little while like a wave, and then they go back into the ground. And so perhaps you can merge these two so-called levels of thought and breath in that common ground and be still. And so perhaps you're getting this experiential quality of the silence at the very heart of your being in every breath and every pulsation of thought. And in our tradition that we're exploring this morning, this silence, this void, this ground is called Shiva, the benevolent. And what they're saying in this tradition is Shivoham, I am Shiva. So at every scale, this divine being is manifesting as you, as me. And the way that we can connect to this manifestation of our own divinity is going into the silence, the stillness, the now. And so it is. Like I was saying, this idea of Tantra has its qualities, its teachings that appear in all different traditions. And when we came upon the Gnostic tradition, that for the most part, I mean, we had some text prior to it, but we hit a huge cache in 1945 in Nag Hammadi, Egypt. And there we have the Gospel of Thomas. And the Gospel of Thomas is the so-called secret teachings or esoteric teachings of Jesus, Yeshua. And you have a very tantric, Zen-like quality to these sayings within the Gospel of Thomas. For instance, so the disciples say, Jesus saw babies nursing. He said to his followers, these nursing babies are like those who enter the kingdom. And then the disciples said to him, then shall we enter the kingdom as babies? And Jesus said to them, when you make the two into one, and when you make the inner like the outer, and the outer like the inner, and the upper like the lower, and when you make male and female into a single one, so that the male will not be male, nor the female be female, when you make eyes in place of an eye, hand in place of a hand, a foot in place of a foot, an image in place of an image, then you will enter the kingdom of God. So this, before we get into the eye, hand, image, all that stuff, notice what he's doing. He's relieving the tension between the opposites. He's saying that the inner and the outer are one. Male and female are one. Above and below are one. This is exactly what we just described in this weaving of the Tantra, that in reality, God only is the oneness. We are perceiving this as fragmented and fractured, and we are distorting that oneness because we're looking at it from a skewed lens of the identity center or ego. And it's a self-limiting process that we're doing, and so we're distorting the oneness into fragmentation. Jesus is saying the kingdom of God is right here. You just have to harmonize. You have to transcend the tension. You have to relax and open up to the fact that there's the oneness ready to come in when you can make yourself like a little baby. Now, why a little baby? It's before we start thinking. It's before we have the capacity to language what we think. Right? It's what would be called the prior unity, that babies, as Freud had recognized, are in an oceanic state of consciousness. So for the newborn, the blanket and the thumb are no different. They're both being experienced as this prima materia, this fundamental matter. And so a baby is actually in an unconscious state of oceanic union. And so what we're doing is we come out of that Garden of Eden, right, through our language, through our thinking process. But in order to come to our wholeness, we have to transcend and include everything that came before. And it's like we go back into this prior unity state. But now we're aware of it. Unlike the baby who's unconscious of it, we now are aware of this prior unity. And what's beautiful about these tantric teachings is the ocean, right? You know how it says that the drop becomes the ocean, right? That's the prior unity of the baby. The drop becomes the ocean. In the tantric adept, the one that goes through the process of transformation and enlightenment, that ocean now becomes the drop. So there's a total embodying of the oceanic potential of God consciousness within the individual expression. That's Tantra. It's not a negating. It's a transcending and including. It's an embracing. It's making the inner and outer one. It's making the above and below one. It's integration. It's yoga. It's religion, right? So this is the idea of becoming like a little baby and entering the kingdom of God. So again, every moment, every breath is the invitation. Before we get into the Shiva Tantra teachings, there's another interesting tradition that we have in the Hermetic tradition from Egypt. And if you're familiar with the Kybalion, that's these principles of Hermeticism. And we just want to look at a couple of things. So there are all these different rubrics or laws of reality. And the first law is all is mind. The universe is conscious, right? The universe is divine mind, divine awareness. The second principle of the Kybalion is that there's a principle of correspondence, right? As above, so below, as within, so without. And so, in other words, the greatest celestial mysteries are also being embodied and displayed within the most rudimentary and fundamental and worldly everyday situations. So you can have access to the ultimate mystery in the most innocuous, seemingly everyday event. So that's why you'll hear stories in Zen where a Zen practitioner is really, cultivating this deep insight and silencing the mind. And then he's in the field plowing or hoeing or something, and a rock hits the wooden post. And in the sound of that rock hitting the metal post, he goes into Satori. Because it's in that moment, in that shock, in that mundane event, that the ultimate reality can be accessed. It's in recognizing, like the ancient Egyptians did, when the little dung beetle is rolling the dung ball. Right? You ever see this? They call it the god Kefra. And it's this dung beetle who's rolling a dung ball. And in the dung ball are all of its eggs. And its eggs are eating the dung of the animal, but it's rolling it, right, as it goes along the desert floor. The ancient Egyptian mind recognized this as the god of resurrection. Because Kefra, if you ever looked at it, it's the beetle, and it has the sun disk above its head. And it's basically saying that we have the seeds of our own future that we are pushing into reality, just like this dung beetle is. And this is the idea that we never die. There's constant renewal, constant resurrection. That's another example of the law of correspondence. Again, in the ancient Egyptian mind, the god Thoth, the god of magic, language, wisdom, he's often represented as an ibis. And an ibis is known to stand on one leg and look at the still pool, waiting to find its lunch or what have you. But this idea of being poised and still and completely one-pointed in its focus represents meditation, which gives you wisdom. So all of nature is displaying these correspondences to metaphysical ideas, right? So that's an important quality of knowing how the secret teachings work, that you're never away from the master. Like as Tilopa said to Naropa in the tantric teachings of Buddhism, the path is the guru. In other words, right where you are is the guru. And when I went to India several years ago, one of the things that became abundantly clear is when you're walking around the temple and these seemingly mundane material things, everything is displaying the teaching. Do you have eyes to see and ears to hear? It's always giving you access if you're ready for it, right? One last story is the master and the disciple are walking in the forest, and the disciple says to the master, "What is the gateway to Zen?" And the master says, "Shh. Do you hear the waterfall?" Yes. That's the gateway to Zen. This is the beauty of it. Every sound is the mantra of the Buddha, right? Every pulse is giving you this access. Do we take it? Or are we dragging our past into the present moment and not able to see what's in front of us right here and now? And then finally, let's look at this principle of rhythm. And it says here in the Kybalion, everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. And it says here, this principle embodies the truth that in everything there is manifested a measured motion to and fro, flow and inflow, a swing backward and forward, a pendulum-like movement, a tide-like ebb and flow, a high tide and a low tide. There is always an action and a reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and a sinking. This is in the affairs of the universe, suns, worlds, men, animals, mind, energy, and matter. Everything pulses. Everything ebbs and flows. Everything is beating, right? And so we're going to see how all of this plays out when we look at the Shiva teaching of the 5 acts of God. More to go on that one. I feel like I never left kindergarten. It's like show and tell for me every Sunday morning. So this is the poems of Lal Ded, D-E-D, Lal Ded. Lal Ded is a Kashmiri poet. She lived in the 1200s, totally illuminated, but her poetry shows the struggle and the experiences that led up to her illumination. She not only spoke to the Kashmiri Shaivites, right, those that worship the ultimate as Shiva, but she also had, she still to this day has a great affinity and honor amongst the Sufis and amongst other Hindu sects, because her poetry, as you'll hopefully find, transcends caste, religion, and creed. So Lal Ded means grandmother Lal, right? Ded is grandmother. But what she liked to refer to herself as is Lala. So you'll hear that in the poems. One shrine to the next, the hermit can't stop for breath. Soul, get this. You should have looked in the mirror. Going on pilgrimage is like falling in love with the greenness of a faraway grass. In other words, don't seek outside of yourself for enlightenment. It's not over there. Right? It's not anywhere but here. You have to turn your gaze or your focus around and begin to look deep within your heart. There you'll find the soul. What's also interesting in these teachings of the yoga science is when you're breathing, it's a constant mantra of Soham. When you inhale, it's so. When you exhale, it's hum. And in Sanskrit, that is, I am he. I am Shiva. I am the soul. And so unconsciously, we are chanting this mantra, they say 16,000 times a day. Soham. I am reality. Are we paying attention? We are spinning webs of fantasy, right? We must become like little babies again and allow all of those cobwebs of thought to be dissolved. Come back to the prior unity, this oceanic bliss of the present moment, and this breath will guide you into the secret heart. Right? This is what she's saying. It's not far away. I burnt up the landscape with footprints, looked for him everywhere. Then it hit me. What am I thinking? He's everywhere. Lala distilled this truth from 100 pieces of talk. Now hear this, people, and go mad. Right? When we find the nectar of bliss within the very heart of who we are, that's divine madness. It's divine ecstasy. Right? The word ecstasy has been critiqued by those that write on yoga and these matters. They have coined another term called ecstasy. Ecstasy means to stand out from, ek in Greek, and stasis, to stand. Ecstasy means you stand in. You establish yourself in the still point within the core of your being, and you stand there. You abide there, right? And this also plays in, I'm giving you all these philological things and big words and everything like that, but I hope they are triggering something for you. In Greek, resurrection is anastasis, and it means to stand up again. But what they're basically getting at is you have to stand the way we were just saying, stand. Find the Christ within and stand there. Don't move. Don't go out into the world, right? When you repent, you're turning your face from the world and you're looking for what Lala was just saying, the one who dwells right here in the heart. And then you stand with him. And when you do, you're in ecstasy or ecstasy. And then here. So she says Shiva or Keshava. Now Keshava is another name for Krishna. Keshava actually refers to Krishna's beautiful black hair, right? The black-haired one. So Shiva or Keshava, or the enlightened one, the Buddha, or the lotus-born, Padmasambhava. Whatever he calls himself, I just wish he'd cure this poor woman of life. Be he, or he, or he, or he. Like, find your Ishtadevata. Find the one that inspires you. If it's Jesus or the Mother Mary or Padmasambhava, you're going to find where your music is really synced up with a tradition or a teacher, right? For me, it's Jesus and A Course in Miracles. That's my primary source, right? For you, it might be different. But you'll find the he that really bonds with you. And then he'll take you. Okay. So on this note of being in divine madness, love mad, I, Lala, started out, spent days and nights on the trail. Circling back, I found the teacher in my own house. What a brilliant trick. What luck, I said, and hugged him. See, that's really an important aspect of becoming attuned to the enlightened state. Because the seeking mind is often hijacked by the ego consciousness. And the ego is always starting from the premise that you don't have it yet. And you need to go find it. And it's something, some person, some book, some place. And it's not here, and it's not you. So start your search and go out. And God's grace will meet you, right? If the desire is true and you go out and your intention is you want to wake up, you're going to find it. But it's going to take you back. That's what she's saying. You'll go out, but it will bring you in, right? And it's always been here. What luck. Like you never really have to leave because you are what you're seeking. And this is what that breath exercise was teaching us. The very ground of being, the very silence of being is right here. But we're not quiet. We're not still. The Zen class. Listen to this one now. I wore myself out looking for myself. No one could have worked harder to break the code. I lost myself in myself and found a wine cellar. Nectar, I tell you, there were jars and jars of the good stuff and no one to drink it. This is what she's saying. The kingdom of God is within you. You have the riches already. You have the nectar already. Don't disqualify yourself. You know, Jesus in A Course in Miracles says, beware of the defense mechanism of the ego that is called externalization. He uses a Freudian term. Externalization means, again, you exclude yourself from the here and now of the living pulse of the kingdom. It's not here and now. You declare that, and so it's true for you. That's the ego now gets to live in place of God in your awareness. Now the ego has gotten you to deny that it's here and now and it's within. It then says it's external to you. So that's why, again, don't be, down or upset about this idea. When you do go out, like you're coming here on a Sunday morning, you're going out, you're going to find what you're looking for, right? Your intention gives it to you. But any person or teaching worth its salt is going to say, don't look out here. That's the teaching. Look inside. You've come out to get the teaching. But the teaching is going to say, turn around and look. So you are going out to get it, but it's telling you to go in to find it. Again, when you make the inside like the outside, wrapped up in yourself, she's talking to Shiva or God, wrapped up in yourself, you hid from me. All day I looked for you. And when I found you hiding inside me, I ran wild, playing now. Me, now you. And it's this beautiful idea of walking with God, right? This is what the Hebrew prophets will often bring up, like Enoch walked with God, Noah walked with God, Abraham walked with God. And in the Hebrew, they use this reflexive verbal stem, and it's hithalek, that you're walking with God and you're communicating with God. You're participating with God. Now you, now me. Now you, now me. And there's a bond, there's a relationship that you have at your most intimate core with divinity itself. And it's talking with you every moment. Every moment. And that's ecstasy or ecstasy or divine madness. Because you realize everything that you thought you were needing in the world and couldn't get or you thought you lost is here in spades. Right? A wine cellar, jars and jars of the good stuff. Right? Not the ripple that we were looking for in the world or the night train. Couple more. Let's see. When the dirt was wiped away from my mind's mirror, people knew me for a lover of God. When I saw him there, so close to me, he was all, I was nothing. As the moonlight faded, I called out to the mad woman, eased her pain with the love of God. It's Lala, I cried, waking up the loved one. I mixed with him and drowned in a crystal lake. Few more. I didn't believe in it for a moment, but I gulped down the wine of my own voice. And then I wrestled with the darkness inside me, knocked it down, clawed it, ripped it to shreds. Right? I doubted it, but then I gulped down the wine of my own voice. Sometimes you'll have people that come in your life and you're giving them the most illuminated message for them, the instructions, the teaching, and somehow you're not really absorbing it yourself. Gulp down your own words. Let that come in. But when you let it come in, notice that there is resistance. There is this tension between the self that you think you are and the self that God knows you are. And so you have to be relentless and rigorous with self-examination and a letting go of all the illusions that you're not. It's like a samurai or a warrior cutting through all of the illusions of false feelings and false thinking and false beliefs, right? I knocked down what was blocking. I clawed at it and ripped it to shreds. Don't let any illusion hold you back from the nectar. I hacked my way through 6 forests, and she's meaning the 6 senses, right? The eyes, nose, ears, tongue, mouth, skin, right? Touch, taste, smell, hearing, sight, and consciousness. Those are the six senses, or 6 forests, because they can delude you, right? Your senses trick you and your mind tricks you. So they are like 6 forests. I hacked my way through 6 forests until the moon woke up inside me. The sky's breath sang through me, dried up my body's substance. I roasted my heart in passion's fire and found Shankara, Shiva. Two more. I pestled my heart in love's mortar. Right? This is like Rumi saying that he's in the wine press of God, and God is imaged there as this mad winemaker stomping on Rumi, right, to squeeze out the true essence of Rumi. Rumi also said, in light of what we were just reading, I was raw, then I was cooked, and now I'm burnt. And this idea of there's nothing left in me that is not of God. All of the false self has been burned up. Right? This is the spiritual path. If you love your life, you're going to lose it. But if you lose your life for my sake, you'll find it. Right? No one can follow me unless he takes up his own cross and crucifies himself, burns himself up. That's how you get in the door. Another Rumi story, right? The seeker comes to the door of the friend, which is God, knocks on the door, and the friend doesn't open the door. He says, who is it? And the seeker says, it's me. And he says, go away. And he was distraught, right? Burning up for longing for God, goes away, really wrestling with himself through this rigorous introspection. Comes back a year later, knocks on the door. The friend says from inside, who is it? And he says, it's you. Then the door opens, and he says, come on in. There's no room for 2 eyes in my house. Right? It's glorious. So when you think you're at your end, when you think you're done, you're going to cook a little more. You're going to be burnt up. Rejoice. Finally, my mind boomed with the sound of Om. My body was a burning coal. 6 roads brought me to a 7th. That's how Lala reached the field of light. Right? Burned up. And then the Sahasrara, then the 1,000 petals open. Then the gateway can be found. I need a drink. So our final stop on the way of Tantra today is with Christopher Wallace's excellent book, Tantra Illuminated. And talking about this idea of self-emptying, letting go, undoing, right? He's saying within the tantric tradition, the non-dual Shaiva Tantra, this is the way of meditation. So to use his words, which he really nicely puts here, we cultivate awareness through meditation-focused spiritual practice, by which we progress in stages towards the state of constant awareness of our real nature, with our powers and potencies fully expanded, an awareness that is ever arising, ever new, ever refreshing itself. So you can hear in that when you do come to this place of divine illumination, the pulse doesn't stop. The dynamism doesn't stop. There's an ever arising and a renewing within the divine realm. So even though we see it right now within this very veiled view of thinking something comes, it abides for a little while, and then it dies or disappears, and we oftentimes mourn, or we try to grip onto something so it doesn't go back into the ground, because we're misperceiving reality, and that's why we suffer. So what he's saying is, when we go from darkness to light, we will recognize that everything continues on this way of pulse and dynamism. So we can actually have that vision now. This is the whole beauty of allowing above and below to become one, so that we don't grip and suffer when we recognize the divine pulse moving all things, because nothing, no one ever leaves the ground. We are eternal. There is no loss. That's insane. But we are not aware of it because we're excluding ourselves from the ground of our own being. And so we look at forms which are temporary, and they go. And we mourn and suffer because we're not standing on the ground. So anyway, now it is important to note that in the context of non-dual Shaiva Tantra, the practice of meditation is primarily destructive in nature. That is, it allows you to strip away your false, limited notions about what you are, revealing your true nature, the core of being, that is all you have ever been. As Abhinavagupta teaches, if the false mental constructs about ourselves are destabilized, then dissolved, the great heart will stand revealed in its fullness. Since you are already that, nothing need be added to make you perfect, though it is also the case that most of us will need to strengthen our capacities through exercising them if we wish to maintain our connection to our innate perfection. The process of uncovering the core reality of your being is very different from the kind of therapy aimed at making you feel better. That's an important point. Remember, we're talking about burning and cooking and tearing down and destroying. The spiritual path will do that for you, so it can liberate you. If you're coming to the spiritual path to feel better within the dream of your own self-limiting ego, oftentimes the teachings are too potent, too strong, too off-putting, and we go for something more along the lines of, like we keep saying, stroking me, telling me I'm okay as the ego. The process of uncovering, yes. For some, it can be very difficult, even searingly painful, to surrender the self-images in which so much energy has been invested, but it will inevitably result in vaster, far more vaster joy. Right? So just be clear too that when you're undergoing the painful process of undoing, like it's sometimes you're scared, you're disoriented, you're freaked out, you're really anxious and troubled, what's causing it is not God or the light of reality. It's our attachment to what we identified with and as, right? That's why he'll say in A Course in Miracles, whenever you find this process of undoing difficult, it's a sure sign of your misplaced and misidentified loyalty. In other words, the struggle, the pain, is because we're loyal to an illusion and we're not willing to let it go. That's the suffering. Right? Let go or be dragged, kind of a thing. And then finally, the central tool in this process of dissolution, which is simultaneously the process of self-revelation, is the practice of discernment. For it is what allows us to distinguish between reality and our own mental constructs that we project onto reality. So through discernment, we examine and discard ever more refined conceptualizations of reality. So in the Buddhist tradition, the idea of discernment, right, clear seeing, vipassana or insight, is always coupled with calming, quieting, right, shamatha. And so you have to become very calm, relaxed, and quiet so that your discerning capacity becomes tuned in, dialed in, accurate. The quieter you become and train your attention, the more laser-like your insight to cut through false concepts, right? And so we do this. We deepen our quiet and we really amplify our insight. The two go together. And so this process of discerning and cutting through false identification, in the Genko Roku, the lineage teachings of Zen, there's that story of Zen Master Dogen. And you've heard me say this before. He's working on cutting through by doing his zazen and saying, drop body, drop mind. Right? So whatever is arising within the mental or physical dimensions, I am burning it up. I'm cutting it down. I'm ripping it to shreds. Drop body, drop mind. Right? That's my practice. So Kensho, right? Illumination. He goes to his master, lights the incense, makes the bow. He's like, body and mind dropped. And the master looks at him and goes, now drop, body and mind dropped. In other words, the concepts become increasingly more refined. And what you are using as the cutting tool or your discernment also has to be brought back into the ground. The tool is over. You've used it. It's like what the Course calls forgiveness. You forgive everything. You come back into the whole state. Now forgiveness can be released. Yes? Okay. All this clear? Okay, so we've all seen this image of Shiva, yes? The Nataraja, the dancing Shiva. And the dancing Shiva displays the 5 acts of God. So you have creation in one hand, his right hand has the drum. And there is creation. It's the drum beat, it's the rhythm, it's the pulse of the heart, right? Manifesting everything, emission, right? And then you have the hand that is like this, and that is the duration or the abidance of what is created. It's the sign fear not, but it's how things abide for a little while. And then he's holding in his left hand the fire, which is the dissolution, creation, continuance, dissolution. But then you have this arm that cuts across his body and points down. And that's the element or principle of occlusion or self-forgetting. And then finally here he has his left leg raised above the ground. And that's the element of anugraha or anugraha. This is grace. And so these two I want to focus on right now, because what we've been talking about all this time, especially when we were looking at the breath, is Breath comes in, it abides for a little while, and then it dissolves into the ground. Breath comes out, it abides for a little while, dissolves into the ground. Creation, maintenance, and dissolution. We're doing it every moment, pulsing, right? Now, the occlusion and grace elements are your choice making in the moment. In this endless pulse of creation, abiding, and dissolution, your choice is to be awake or self-forgetting. Every moment you have this choice to be awake or to forget who you are. So let's just look a little bit here. So you are performing the 5 acts of God within yourself all day, every day. You create thoughts, hold them, dissolve them, and choose to reveal or conceal what's really going on and who is really in charge. Then create again. You're always doing one of these 5 things, whether you are responding to external or internal stimuli. You manifest the objects of awareness that create your specific experience. You hold on to them, you let them go, and then you choose to repose in your true nature and thus recognize yourself as the divine author of the whole process, or to overlook yourself and instead look to the next thing that might give you pleasure in an endless cycle. If you choose the former, recognizing yourself, you choose empowerment, to recognize that the space of expanded self-awareness between thoughts is their unchanging ground, to recognize that there is one eternal perceiver that is arising and dissolving of the threefold cognitive process, and you are it. It is supremely empowering and liberating, for in so doing, you realize that you are always choosing your experience of reality, and you can also choose differently. You are not and never have been a victim of circumstance. For no one else can determine your inner state for you. True, choosing differently can be quite difficult at first because of the power of your habitual mind. We tend to repeat old familiar patterns rather than making new choices. Even so, identifying yourself as the ground of the process of thought instead of your thoughts means that you are no longer at the mercy of those thoughts. The choice is yours. Okay, blue bag's going to go around. I hope I didn't run over time. If you're joining on Facebook or YouTube, you can click the link below, and thank you for your donations. Greatly appreciate it. Any thoughts, comments, or questions? John?
You talked about your Buddhist class a couple times.
Yes.
Do you have any more information about that?
Yes. It's April 16th. It starts on Tuesday. I think I sent you an email because I put your email into my list. But we'll get you all the information you need. Yes. Anyone else? Thoughts, comments, questions?
What was that word you said?
Entity?
Entity.
Yeah.
Kind of like intimacy, into me, I see.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, yeah. Bless the offering. Thank you very much. We charge this with the intention that it bring seeds of light into all minds, whatever form it may take. And so it is. Amen. Okay, my friends, let's rise, seal the deal. Resting within the ground of being. With each breath, we draw in and dissolve. Come to this place of total openness, silence, and serenity, where we will remember or recognize the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. All right. Thank you so very much. We'll see you tomorrow night if you're joining in on A Course in Miracles class. Peace. Thank you, guys.